challenges in coming up with this film and co-produced by a lot of people?
Sure. Well, the first challenge really is, although it is my third feature film, it is my first to be set and produced in the US. So I really wanted to, it is kind of an experiment and a risk in determining whether I can work in the English language, like whether my sensibility and my voice as a filmmaker could translate in the English medium. And also, I think since it is my first film after my gender transition, I definitely felt the pressure to kind of prove that I can do it. And that is why I also decided to wear quite a few hats in making this film, because for me, it is about authorship. I don't mean to sound pretentious, but it is concept of being on a tour and being kind of in control and responsible for telling the story that you want to tell. And the previous Q&As that I've had, at the different festivals where we premiered, I've been asked so how was it challenging or was it difficult, being the writer, the director, the editor, and a performer in the film. But I think that they are part of the same thing, and it's telling a story. And in fact, for me specifically, writing, directing, and editing are essentially writing the film in different phases of production. Editing is writing the film in post, and I cannot imagine, at least for projects that have been responsible in developing and conceiving, I cannot imagine allowing someone else to edit it. If I have the say so, for that matter, and especially for this kind of film, which is, although it is not autobiographical, it is personal in a sense that it is about a trans woman immigrant in America. And I wanted to prove that because, when you're a minority filmmaker in the US or in Hollywood, it's very easy for you to be pigeonholed, whether you're a female filmmaker or a filmmaker of color. And I wanted to prove that I can do shit, And so it was quite a risk for me in terms of my career. Aesthetically, it doesn't quite fit into the mold of what we consider palatable Filipino cinema when it comes to international film festivals. It doesn't strictly follow, and this is not to disparage, the aesthetics of Brillante Mendoza or Alavia's film, which are very compelling in their own way. And I wanted to use the opportunity of making the film that on paper sounded like a gritty, grimy, miserabilistic kind of third world drama, and subvert expectations when I can by infusing the film with a sense of lyricism and poetry and sensuality. And this is what I discover has kind of been my style, a kind of hushed intimacy and a restraint in my films. So I hope that answers the question. Yes.
When was the story conceptualized?
I came up with the story about 3 years ago. I think that it's evolved since then. And in fact, I think the relationship between Olga and Olivia has been more developed on the screenplay stage but then during the production, Lynn Cohen, as extraordinary as she is, can sometimes be a wild card on set. So I ended up kind of truncating the relationship. I mean, essentially, they are two immigrant women who migrated to the States, at different parts, in their lives. Like Olga, who's Russian Jewish, migrated to the States 50 years ago, whereas Olivia migrated a lot more recently. But they are similarly in some kind of limbo. Olivia's is far more obvious and literal because she's undocumented in Trump's America, whereas Olga, who is suffering from dementia, is experiencing a kind of psychological and emotional displacement. And that was the kind of relationship, aside from the Alex Olivia relationship, that I also wanted to really focus on, but in a subtle, nuanced way, hopefully. But that changed, and so the finished film is quite different from what it was in the writing stage.
Thank you.
Hi. How do you feel that you are the first trans woman of color to direct and headline a film competing at Venice?
Of course, it is quite an achievement, and I'm very proud to have accomplished that. Of course, with the help of my producers and the very talented cast and crew. But I also, I don't want to reduce myself to that. Aside from being a trans woman, I'm also Filipino. I'm also an immigrant. I'm also all kinds of things, and that is why, although I did make a movie about a transgender immigrant woman, I also hope that people come away from it thinking that it's not that it's just hopefully a good queer film, but a good film, a compelling, moving, hopefully haunting film. And if it means being the first trans woman of color, the designation means that I'm able to get my work out there and to continue working and making films, and I'm very thankful for that designation. Yes.
Can you talk more about your next film, which is Park Avenue? Is it another immigrant story?
Park Avenue, which was recently announced in Screen International, it is another immigrant story. I'm supposed to really keep this in the wraps, but it's recently been announced that we're going to be working with Michelle Caneta and Jody Maria was in a version, and Tony Robuska, but we're also in the process of casting American actors. And it is an immigrant story, but it's different in that it's about a Filipino immigrant woman who married into American wealth about 25 years ago. And so she's quite established now in New York society, and she finds herself reconnecting with an estranged nephew who's played by Tony Robuska, and she essentially kind of manages his introduction into New York society. So she flies her in from the Philippines and introduces her into New York society, but in the process, they find themselves making morally dubious and problematic choices in order to maintain their stature and affluence. And this is me, I think, trying to work in a different mode that's kind of novelistic. And I also want to, experiment with this film both narratively and stylistically. I've been influenced by the works of Douglas Sirk and Max Ophuls in terms of their cinematography, Todd Haynes, and I want to work, in that kind of visual style and that mode with this kind of film.
Okay, so we have a question at the back.
Yes.
Congratulations for the film, and I'd just like to point out that there's a unique stamp, especially in the scene that Olivia had a breakdown. Okay. I just wanted to ask if you, as Isabel, how do you relate, or how are you similar to Olivia as a Filipina living in the US?
Thank you for that question. I think, it's interesting to me just realizing this, that I never realized that I was trans growing up here in the Philippines. But I only realized it after I migrated to the United States. And I think that has a lot to do with my conception or understanding what being a transgender individual meant. Because growing up, I was kind of the nerdy, very studious type, but at that time, I think, or even until now, like a concept of a trans woman, I think, or how it's portrayed in the media at least, is very, very overly concerned with femininity and docility. And it was only after I moved to the States where I saw, on YouTube, these transgender people who were either, who were writers, who worked in nonprofit organizations, who were marketers, and that I found myself, identifying with the questions that they were asking themselves, and that's why I wanted to depict a different kind of trans woman in Olivia. I'd like to think that with Olivia, I'm trying to draw a portrait of pragmatism and resilience, and as a character and as a performer, someone who's unafraid to be unattractive, and without vanity. And I think that's very important because when it comes to portrayals of trans women, especially in films where the leads are, the main protagonist is like a cisgender white male, they're almost always objectified, or objects of ridicule. But in this film, I wanted to take the opportunity to paint her as a flawed, complicated, even difficult character, and that people think of her not as whether is she pretty or not, but can identify with the crisis and the questions that she's asking herself. And that is my goal with this film.